Do you want to reduce your energy bills? Or maybe you want to use greener energy? Go solar and get a discount. Right now, Which members can get a 7.5% discount on solar panels and their installation if you use Heatable, a Which Trusted Trader approved service. You can also include a storage battery and EV charger, handy if you're looking at making the switch to an electric car. To make use of this exclusive offer, simply head to which.co.uk/solar-offer. That's which.co.uk/solar-offer before the 30th of September 2025. And if you're not already a Which member, you can grab a year's membership for 50% off the usual price. To do that, go to which.co.uk/podcast offer to get involved. Start your solar journey today. Go solar and get a discount with Which. The use of private healthcare in the UK is on the rise, but so are the associated costs. So is it worth your hard-earned cash? This is Which Money. So hello and welcome to this week's episode then. I'm Rob Lilly-Jones in for Lucia Ariano this week, and today I'm joined by two of Which's best expert voices. First up is senior researcher and writer Megan Thomas.
Hello.
Lovely to have you here. And we are also joined by Dean Sobers, our in-house insurance expert and, as of last week, the winner of the General Insurance Journalist of the Year award at the Headline Money Awards. Welcome.
Oh, yeah.
And congratulations, Dean. It's lovely to have you with us. Thank you for being here. And Megan, thank you for being here as well. Now, this week we are revealing the results of our latest research into private medical insurance providers. Dean will be telling us which companies topped the table. But first, though, Megan, can you outline the difference between private healthcare and private medical insurance?
Yeah, so private healthcare is just any sort of medical treatment that you get that is not paid for by the NHS. So it could be anything. It could be GP appointment, could be a surgery, could be like an over-the-counter medicine. And private medical insurance is a way to pay for it. So you're paying in monthly, or maybe your employer's paying in, and it's a way to cover those costs rather than the actual treatment itself.
And have we got any stats on how many people are paying for private healthcare?
Yes, so according to the Private Healthcare Information Network, there were nearly 1 million private admissions in 2024. And thinking about something specific like GP consultations, a market research company called Lang Buisson estimates that 13% of GP appointments were private in 2024, up from 3% 2 decades ago.
So it's not insignificant. It's a lot of people.
No, it's massively rising, yeah.
And you mentioned that these people might be paying for GP appointments, but are there other types of care that they might be paying for as well?
Yeah. So it could be, as I say, it could be surgery. It could be something like physiotherapy. It could be treatment for a chronic condition. It could be mental health care. It's any kind of treatment that you kind of could get on the NHS, but paying for it privately. And
presumably, it depends on what treatment you're getting, how much you might pay. The cost must vary quite a lot.
Yes, massively. So when you're getting even within one type of care, like a GP appointment, if you're getting it online, maybe it's only a 10-minute appointment. It could be maybe £40 I've seen when we've looked into pricing. Or if you're in person, if you're in central London, it could be £250, and that could be a longer appointment. And then for something like hip replacement, for example, according to Lang Buisson, cost on average £14,000 in 2024.
Wow, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So Dean, how then does private medical insurance come into this? What's the benefit of having insurance rather than just paying up front for some of these services?
As Megan's kind of outlined, there's been quite a growth in the number of people that have been turning to the private healthcare system. And within that system, there are all sorts of prices, some of them quite affordable, quite low, some of them, potentially in the tens of thousands, maybe even higher. So what private, and most of us, in a pinch probably don't have access to those sometimes vast amounts of money, especially if we're talking about some kind of sort of serious treatment or something, some surgery, for example, or cancer medication, that sort of thing. So what private medical insurance allows you to do is it kind of gives you that assurance that you will be able to have that treatment without at that time having to worry about the cost.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Megan, earlier on you mentioned just how many people are, paying for sort of almost pay-as-you-go private healthcare. Dean, do we know how many people are paying for private medical insurance?
So according to Langbuisson, apparently more than 1 in 10 of us are covered by a PMI scheme at the moment.
And what's the main reason for having a policy? Do we know?
So we did a bit of survey research among our members, and one of the questions that we asked them was what they prioritised, what made them buy their private medical insurance. And the winner of that that contest by some distance was getting access to shorter wait times. So 71% listed it as one of the most important features, which probably isn't really surprising because wait times are pretty high on the NHS. So that seems to have been driving quite a lot of people to seeking alternative access to healthcare. And then half of those that we asked chose it just for peace of mind. And over a third chose it for access to treatments that were potentially unavailable on the NHS. So a kind of an example there can be certain types of cancer therapies, for example, might not be available to you depending on where you live and what your trust provides.
Megan, do you think enough people understand what PMI covers? I mean, Dean mentioned some of the things there. Do enough people understand what it covers and what it doesn't cover as well, maybe importantly?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily obvious what is covered. Generally, it's only acute conditions that are covered, which is sort of a sudden illness has come on, an injury or something like that. And chronic conditions or existing conditions aren't always covered, that can vary from provider to provider.
One of the kind of barriers towards people's understanding of what they might be covered for in private medical insurance is that it's very kind of jargon filled, and some of the words that insurers will use might mean slightly different things to what they might mean when spoken about by medical professionals. So, for example, the terms acute and chronic have very specific meanings in the insurance world. So acute basically means something where a situation where a medical intervention can be made with a view towards resolving that condition, with a view towards making you better. Whereas a chronic condition is something that requires long-term management and not necessarily something that's going to be made better.
I think that's a really important clarification. I think that's really, really important information. As we said, I think a lot of people maybe would fall foul of some of those definitions.
Yeah, reasonably. It's like insurer code, basically.
Yeah, it was something which you are well versed in at this stage. And Dean, obviously, on this, how much are people paying for private medical insurance? Megan gave us some of the figures. What was it, £14,000 for a hip replacement, possibly? Mm-hmm. For private medical insurance, what sort of price points are we talking here? So
there can be quite a range, depending quite markedly on how old you are and how you bought the insurance. So I think probably the majority of people that have private medical insurance pay for it through a workplace scheme, get it as a benefit. So they are paying for it out their wage packet, but it's probably not a particularly high cost or not a cost they necessarily notice that they're spending. It does tend to get quite a lot higher when you kind of sort of get older and if you're buying a policy independently. This was the case for a lot of the people that we surveyed, and we found that those that were aged, when we asked them what they were paying, we asked those that aged between 50 and 59 were paying £162 a month on average. So I think we're somewhere in the vicinity. We're approaching $2,000 there, I think.
Yeah, quick maths, that works.
£2,000 a year, I think. And those aged between 70 and 79 were paying £244 a month. So yeah, basically, the older you get, you can be expecting to pay several thousands of pounds a year.
So does it make sense then? I don't know if this is an odd question to ask, but humour me. Does it make sense then to get private medical insurance earlier in your life, or does it not really work like that?
Whenever you buy it originally, as you get older, you're still going to be seeing those price increases as you age, just because the age that you are has an effect, because from the insurer's vantage point, the older you are, the more likely you are to need to make a claim, more likely you are to become ill, basically. So that's factored into your price.
So quite simply, if you want to get it, if this is something you're interested in, just get it at the time of life that is right for you.
Yeah, although, of course, it being so expensive, the dilemma a lot of people face is that it's some, with a lot of people, they might like to have it, they might really value it, but it's not necessarily going to be affordable for everyone. And a number of people in our survey commented on the fact that they'd owned it for a long time. It was something that they really valued, but it was becoming too expensive to keep up. So they were considering other options, like pay-as-you-go method.
Yeah, like you said, some of those figures are particularly high, especially as you get older. And I know on this as well, there is a bit of a confrontation is maybe too strong a word, but there's a bit of debate ongoing between doctors and the insurers as well, aren't there?
Yeah, there is a bit of tension between the insurers and between medical professionals. And what it mainly stems from is the fact that most people that access private healthcare do so through an insurance policy. And what that means is that the insurers have quite a lot of sway over the business that a private hospital or private doctors will receive, and that means that they can they can influence how much doctors and medical professionals can charge. So, for example, an insurer will have if you take out an insurance policy, it will have a list of hospitals that it covers, and it will have a list of medical professionals that it covers, so doctors, anaesthetists, therapists, and so on. And what they will do is they will have a certain maximum amount that they will be willing to pay in fees, and doctors that choose to charge above this fee, that shortfall will be put onto the customer. But what a lot of private medical insurers do now as well is they have special lists of doctors that they will recommend that only charge up to that fee, so there's no shortfall. What we've been hearing is that there's some criticism that insurers have been heavily exerting the influence that they have over doctors, not only to control costs, but to control costs in ways that can actually affect the quality of care that the patients receive. And sometimes without this being particularly transparent to the customer. So we heard from the Independent Doctors Federation that they'd done a survey of 474 doctors last year, and one of the questions that they asked these doctors was whether their sort of assured fees lists that were set by insurers had ever impeded them or their patients from working in partnership to assess their care needs and treat them in line with their clinical judgment. And 84% of the doctors answered yes to this. And there were quite a large number of others that said that they'd received threats of being de-recognised or taken off a doctor's list, taken off an insurer's list of approved specialists. Now, the insurers have, we asked the insurers what they kind of had to, what their view was on these statistics in this situation, and they defended the need and customer demand for insurers to contain costs, because this is all kind of goes into the premium that you pay, and then also to give them give them guidance of who to pick. So there are kind of arguments on both sides. But yeah, it would be fair to say that there is tension between the two groups. I
mean, everything you've just said there, it proves, how pressing this issue is. And it's a big issue, clearly, out there at the moment. Dean, we will get on to our survey results, of course, which I know people are waiting for. So we'll get onto those in a second. And before we get to those survey results, then, Megan, can you tell us some of the names that do provide this type of private care?
Yeah, it's quite a fragmented market, so it might be in your local area, it's just local providers, but there are some bigger chains like Nuffield Health, Spire, and Circle Health Group, and some insurers provide care themselves, like Bupa, for example.
So then, Dean, the big one. Let's get to the elephant in the room, our reviews. People want to know, do we have a which recommended provider in this space?
I'm very sorry to say we don't this time round.
And what does that tell us then?
So what it tells us is the reason that we weren't able to give a which recommended provider award to any of the providers in our survey was all the providers that we looked at, so we looked at 6 providers, and they all got poor scores for value for money, which is probably reflective of the fact that lots of those customers that we surveyed seem to be being charged a lot of money for their policy at a time when everybody's budgets are kind of squeezed. So they seem to not be seeing a great amount of value for money in what they were paying. Value for money is one of the areas of the customer experience that we kind of need to be seeing a decent score in order to give that which recommended provider badge. That being said, we did see a decent range of overall customer scores, just overall in terms of how satisfied people were and how likely they'd be to recommend their insurer. So there's a clear leader, which was WPA. It got a customer score of 76%. The next one behind that was Bupa, which got 64%. So that's more than a 10% lead there. So yeah, there was a good range, and we got that overall impression that that with the providers towards the top, that there was generally decent levels of customer satisfaction, but there was just that snag with value for money.
I should say that if people do want to read more of these reviews, they can do. We'll put a link in the description for today's podcast, so wherever you're listening, you can click that link and follow through and read more. But Dean, obviously, you have kind of explained it a bit there. You've said why we haven't got a which recommended provider, because of the costs that are being charged and how people feel about them. But can people still be satisfied that they're going to get good cover from these providers? Yeah,
certainly. I mean, so the general feeling that sort of came from the survey was that most of these customers were generally happy with the cover they were getting, and these were people who'd made claims as well. They were generally happy with the cover that they were getting, and they really valued having private medical insurance. So we don't have any kind of sort of complaints on that front. I will say it's a very, and we were kind of touching on this earlier on, it's a very complicated product. We always and there are lots of potential kind of trapdoors that you can kind of fall down and only realise, at the point of claim that you don't have a certain amount of cover that you thought you did. So it is something that we always recommend if you're not really confident about buying a new policy or switching between providers, that you speak to a qualified broker or an intermediary, just to make sure that you've got the cover that you need.
Really good advice there. As you said, it is a really complicated product, and it will be right for some people. It won't be right for other people. Megan, if it's not worth it for some, if maybe some people have been listening to this and think, oh, maybe that's not worth it for me, and I might just opt for a private appointment, which was something you were mentioning a little bit earlier on. If that's the case, what are the sort of things they should look for when they're trying to choose who to go for?
It can be tricky. I think part of, if you're really sat on private medical care, one thing that is maybe more appealing is that you could take the time to have like a really good connection with your GP, that sort of continuous care that you might struggle to get in the NHS. So I think it's kind of almost shopping around. It's, if you know anyone who's got a good private GP, talk to them, and just take the time to see if it's a good fit, and if it doesn't work out, try another. If you've got any worries about not having the sort of safety net of the NHS, being this big stamp of approval, you can check the General Medical Council's website. They have a register of all licensed doctors. So if you, for some reason, think, maybe this one's a bit sketchy, you can look them up on there. And through doing all that, you can still stay registered with your NHS GP.
Some really, really brilliant advice on today's episode. Thank you both for joining us. And also, just before we do say goodbye to the two of you, I would add that if you do want to read more, I've already said you can read it online over on which.co.uk. You can click the link in the description for today's podcast. But also, if you want to read more brilliant journalism like we've heard today, then you can do that in the Which Money magazine. And if you want to get hold of that, you can become a Which member if you are not already. And 50% off becoming a Which member, you can sign up using which.co.uk/podcast offer. And there is also a link for that in the description for today's episode. So Megan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Dean, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
That brings to an end another podcast from Which. There's loads more for you to read about everything we discussed today. Just head to the episode description for more useful everyday advice. There you'll also see an exclusive offer for podcast listeners like you to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price. And that gives you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year. Plus, your membership helps us to make life simpler, fairer, and safer for everyone. If you'd like to know when we release a new episode, then make sure you press subscribe wherever you're listening, and that way you can be one of the first to listen. And for any questions, comments, or anything in between, then make sure to follow us on social media. We're at Which UK, or you can email us podcasts@which.co.uk. Goodbye. If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.